Good morning, everybody, and welcome to PSG of Mercer County. The professional service group of Mercer County is here for you, anybody that is in any kind of career transition. And so in addition to being a good morning, it is Happy Aloha Friday, as you heard us talking about and Paul brought to attention. So I do like to wear my Aloha shirt, usually Hawaiian style, but Aloha shirt every Friday. It's Aloha Friday is Casual Friday in Hawaii. And I said, this is actually a Halloween themed shirt. It's got birds of paradise flowers and skeletons. So I'm not sure how much you can see right now, but you can see there's a skeleton on my shoulder. This is an eco-friendly shirt. I did not use real skeletons. These were, I did not steal it from anybody. No worries about that. And in addition to being Happy Aloha Friday, today is actually National Frankenstein Day. So always the Friday before, or the last Friday of October, which is the Friday before Halloween, is National Frankenstein Day. And it doesn't celebrate the monster. The monster's name was not Frankenstein. Frankenstein was the doctor, but it does celebrate the creation of Mary Shelley's novel Frankenstein, where she introduced the world to this monstrous creature. And so we get to celebrate National Frankenstein Day once a year, last Friday of October. So if you enjoy the novel, if you want to watch the old movies, go ahead and do so. Or Young Frankenstein, that's always a fun movie as well. PSG of Mercer County is here to help make you more efficient and more effective in your own job search, and we do so by providing a lot of resources online. For one thing, we do have our LinkedIn group. Our LinkedIn group is a little bit of a private group. You can find it by searching by name. It is called PSG of Mercer County. So go into LinkedIn and go to the groups section and search for our group. If you are not yet a member, we encourage you to join the group. Our group is a little bit of a private group in that we only accept people into our group who have been to at least one of our meetings, whether in person or virtually. I don't yet have an ETA of when we'll be able to meet in person again. We are happy to stay virtually for now. So go find our group. We have over 1,690 members in the group, and they are all people that have been to our meetings at least one time. So they're all members or former members of the group. And what is important about that is, one, we're trying to keep just people who are name collectors and list collectors a little bit out of the group. Those are people that are just in LinkedIn for their own purpose or growing their business, and that's not the kind of member we typically want to have. Nothing wrong with salespeople and them conducting business, but it's not the mission of our group. The other thing is, because these are all people who are job seekers or were job seekers, there's a good chance they understand the value of connecting in LinkedIn. Once you're in our group, you now have connection to those 1,696 or 7 people, so you can email them. You can use LinkedIn to contact them very easily, even if they are not yet your own first-degree connection. And then there's a good chance that they will respond to you when you do indeed write to them as well. So a lot of people do complain that when they do email people, they don't get responses back. There's a good chance you'll get a response back from people in our group. And then once you're in our group, use the discussion section, share articles, share job leads, any information you hear about, maybe job fairs that are coming up, anything that you hear about job related, please feel free to contribute, because your activity in our group, in any LinkedIn group, just helps improve your LinkedIn profile as well. So just kind of keep it, related to our mission, stuff around job search and helping job seekers. If you have a boat or car to sell, please don't use our group for that. We also have a website. Our website is psgofmercercounty.org, psgofmercercounty.org. If you are new to our group, you'll be happy to know it is more than just a landing page. It is over 120 web pages of content. It is a very robust website. And so one thing people are looking for every once in a while are places they can do some e-learning. We have a web page in our professional development tab. Look along the top, professional development. There's a menu item there. And then when you're on that page, click on e-learning. Our web page for e-learning has links to 77 different e-learning websites. Most of them, or more than half, are free or have free offerings. Some of them are full subscriptions, and some of them are individual courses that you pay for. Not all of them are free. We did not want to exclude any courses or any programs. You decide which one or ones would be best for you, but at least it could be a one-stop shopping as you're searching for some sort of e-learning and educational and certification access. So please take a look at our e-learning page on the Professional Development tab. As we get started with our meeting, we want to let you know just kind of the agenda. So again, we ask during the meeting, when you do not have a need at the moment to interact with Paul, please keep your system on mute. Put your microphone on mute so that way we don't hear any accidental background noise. And then also for questions and answers, Paul does want this to be a very interactive presentation. So what we'll do is we'll ask you to use chat, and there's two ways you can use it. One is you can just type the word question. And if you type the word question, that's like the electronic equivalent of raising your hand. And so I will be monitoring chat. Paul may be as well, but I will absolutely be monitoring chat. And when I see a question and Paul takes a break for questions, we'll call on you in the order in which I see those questions. Or the other, type the word question followed by your question. And you can do that if you prefer not to actually unmute yourself. And so this way, I'll read the question out loud on your behalf to Paul. And Paul will be taking breaks depending on the groupings of the slides, every 1, 2, or 3 slides. So there'll be lots of opportunities for Q&A, plus there'll be time at the end of the program as well. And then once our program does indeed end, we're going to keep the session open a little while longer, might be 20, 30, 40 minutes. We're just going to hang around the electronic meeting room so we can talk about anything you want. And so if Paul's here, you can continue doing Q&A with Paul, or talk about anything that you like. We can have more discussions on batteries. That's what we talked about at the start of the meeting. So anything we want to talk about, just like hanging around the library. So that will be our agenda for today. Looks like we are all in good position, I see, for us to go forward. We are muted. And so I'm just very pleased on the behalf of PSG of Mercer County to welcome back Paul Cecala. Paul is a certified global career development facilitator, work search author, and founder of Cecala Career Consultants. Has been coaching since 1999 and assisted over 3,000 people in either changing careers or starting their professional lives. He specializes in creating a project plan for your job search with actionable and measurable steps you can take to move your search closer to success. He is often recognized for his strong listening skills and ability to help clients find their success. He has been commended for his networking skills, interviewing techniques, and resume writing prowess. Paul specializes in industries such as biotech, pharmaceutical, green economy jobs, aviation, allied health, IT, and business professions. He has been a program manager for lifelong learning and workforce development training, and career services manager for several proprietary career schools. Paul has a BS in psychology from Florida Institute of Technology. Prior to career coaching, he spent 15 years in corporate aviation, ending as vice president of aircraft charter sales. PSG of Mercer County is very pleased to welcome one of our very favorite career coaches, Paul Cecala.
Thanks, Dave, and thank you for that introduction. And you know, sometimes I feel like we spend too much time talking about me because it's really not about me, it's about y'all. Today is going to be a very, very full presentation. We're going to probably go at least an hour and 15, maybe an hour and 30 minutes with the information that we have to impart today. Because as you see on the agenda, there are 11 different types of background checks that we're going to talk about throughout the presentation. And I just want you to understand that not every company is going to do all 11 of them, but this is the possibility. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a little bit later. Throughout, you'll see two things that are important to note in the presentation. Anytime you see something in green type, that is an action step for you to take to help mitigate whatever background check we're talking about. Anything you see in red is something that you need to be concerned about or aware of to look out for as a potential red flag to an employer. So with that, let's get right into what do we need to talk about in terms of background checks. And of course, we all know why people do them. It's the best way for them to try and get a handle on, is the person I saw in the interview the real person? Or is there something hiding in the closet that I don't know about? But again, don't get too excited or upset, because not all companies do all background checks. In fact, most companies, especially smaller ones, will do very little in the way of background checking. They just simply can't afford it. But the higher level of position you're going for, the more fiduciary responsibility you have or access you have, and oftentimes, certainly if you've got any kind of a security issue, then they're going to probably do more in the way of a background check, with the most extensive being those done for the government in the way of secret and security, clearances. Sorry, my brain didn't want to work. So please just be aware, don't shoot the messenger today. I'm here just to share with you what I've learned over the years of what is potential and possible. But the truth is, we don't have to be overly concerned, because, for example, if you've never been arrested, the chances are there's very little things you need to worry about in the way of a criminal background check if someone were to do one. So think about what you have in your experience, what you have in your background, and then say, okay, is this something I need to be concerned about and address? Or can I just ignore this for now because it's not important to me? So the last 2 years, if you have seen this presentation before, in the last 2 years, there have been a boatload of changes that have taken place. And so I've tried to update this as much as possible. And actually, I've been updating it almost on a monthly basis in the last 3-4 months, because with COVID, things are changing just so rapidly that it keeps me on my toes to keep up with it all. But a lot of societal issues are impacting now on what employers are doing in the way of background checks and how they view you as a candidate and your background and the potential for concern that they might have. Additionally, there have been a lot more laws that have come into place in the last few years than there have ever been before, helping to regulate what employers can and cannot do. Some of them are in our favor, some of them are not, as candidates. So here's the current list of all the organizations on a federal level that have impact into your background checks. The Fair Credit Reporting Act, the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act, the Federal Trade Commission, the Americans with Disabilities Act, as it's been updated over the years, and one of the newest ones is the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. And then HIPAA, of course, is the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act. All of these federal laws help to govern what employers can do. The ACLU is one place that's a great resource to go to if you think you have issues in your background and you need more information. That's one great place to go and get the additional information. But the bottom line is that company policy still predominates what is and is not going to be done when it comes to a background check. But here's what we need to think about here. It's not so much about what your new employer's company policy is. It's more about your past employer's company policies. As the new employer, I can pretty much ask a past employer or anyone else just about anything I want about you. What the past employer has is a policy that will limit how much information they are willing to give me. And in most cases, we all know that today that policy typically is, I'm not going to give out any information other than your title and dates of employment. The concept being I need to manage my risk and ensure that I don't say, or no one in my company says something that you could take as libelous and sue me for if I give information out to another employer. So most employers today are doing a simple employment verification. We'll talk more about that later on. But it's up to that past company's policy what they will and will not give out. So it's important that you know, what does your past employer's policy say, so that you know what they legally can and cannot give out about you, okay? More and more, again, in a way of separating themselves from the risk, employers are using a third party to give that information. And more companies are using third parties to get that information. So again, if I'm doing a background check on a new employee, I'm probably going to hire someone to actually do the background check. And what I'll do is say, here, Dave Schuckman, is my list of parameters. You go and find out, do they meet my list of parameters or not? And all I want you to do is say, yes, Paul, they meet your parameters. No, Paul, they don't. I don't want to know anything else. Then, if you don't meet my parameters, I'm going to say, I'm sorry, we can't hire you because you don't meet the parameters. Please go talk to the third party. Here's their contact information. They will explain to you what negative information was found and help you to figure out how to mitigate that. Of course, in the meantime, I'm probably going to move on to my next candidate because I want to get the position filled. I'm not going to wait for you. So there's more and more layers being added into this in order to manage the risk on both sides of the equation. The other key thing we need to be aware of, every time you submit an electronic ATS application, you are more than likely giving permission for that employer to do the background check. So you need to make sure you read that fine print. Oops, I used to have a animation in there. You need to make sure you read that fine print on those applications before you hit submit. Make sure you know exactly what the employer is legally allowed to do or not based on your signature on that form. Truthfully, you need to do that with a written application as well. So it's not just the electronic ones, but so often we're quick to just apply to whatever we can apply to. And we may not realize how many people we're giving permission to go dig into our background. Again, will they do it? Probably not if they're not interested in you as a candidate, but they might. The other thing that will happen is more often than not, applications are still asking for you to list your references, other people that I can contact. Well, quite often I may, especially with a not so reputable recruiter, I may use those references, contact them, not to talk about you, but to find someone else who's still employed that would be interested and maybe a better candidate for the position. And so I'm using your references to build my resume pool in my practice. So just be aware of what you're giving people permission to do when you fill out those applications. Do we have any questions here? Okay.
Yes, so there's one that has come through from Sam.
Yeah.
When a potential employer checks employment history, I understand that most go back 7 years. Is that true?
In terms of an employment history, no. They can go back as far as they want, or as little as they want. So no, that there is no restrictions on that. It would be potentially a company policy question. The 7 years really comes into effect with credit checks, but we'll go talk more about that in a few minutes. Good question. Anything else?
Any other questions, folks?
Okay, so let's talk about Social Security numbers. And here's the bottom line. 2 things you need to know about Social Security numbers more than anything else. Number one, There are very, very, very few places and times where someone has the legal authority to ask you for and store your social security number. And those specific times and places are generally around reporting financial information to the federal government or the state government. Beyond that, people really don't have authority to ask for your social security number. So the second thing you need to know, just don't give it to people. Now, anytime you say no or don't do something in the application or job search process, you're raising a red flag to the employer to say, well, why should I hire you if you're not going to give me the information I want? I understand that. But what I would want to do prior to giving out my social security number in particular is ask a lot of questions. Tell me, why do you need that now during the application process? What are you going to do with that information? Where and how are you storing it, and who has access to it? And you can explain these questions by saying, listen, I'm simply very concerned about identity theft. I have seen it happen to too many people, and I just want to make sure that the personally identifiable information that I'm giving you will be stored properly. Now, the larger the company, the less likely you need to be concerned about that, because they'll have enough checks and balances in place to make sure that it's handled properly. But that doesn't mean you still don't want to ask questions. I have heard through this presentation a whole bunch of people talk about how companies of different sizes, the individuals responsible for managing the personally identifiable information have ended up using that to provide or conduct some type of identity theft or fraud. And so just be aware who is allowed to have access to that number. For example, every doctor I visit in the last 3 years has asked me for my driver's license. Well, your driver's license has your social security number encoded in there, and it's in New Jersey. And so, no, I'm sorry, you can't have my driver's license. No, you cannot make a photocopy of it. Why do you want to have it? I need to know that the person standing in front of me is the person in my record. Okay, great. I will gladly show you my driver's license every time I walk in this office, and you can compare the license and the picture and my face. But no, you cannot have a copy of it. 9 times out of 10, the doctors have been okay with that. In the 1 time out of 10 they've not, they go and talk to a manager or someone else in the office who says, yeah, I get it, don't worry about it. As long as we see that the names and photos match, we're okay. So don't give it out if you don't have to. Questions here?
Nothing has come up.
So here are the 11 different types of background checks that we're going to talk about. And we'll go through them in this order. And so try and keep the question that you have to the specific check we're talking about at any given moment in time. So let's start with criminal history checks. Criminal history checks will usually go back at least 7 years. They may go back farther, especially if you have any convictions. They are checking a multiple different registries. They're checking the Federal Bureau of Investigation, the Federal Sex Offender Registry, the State Bureau of Investigation, and more are checking county and local police departments. And they're going to check all of those places in any state or locale where you worked or lived during that period of time that they are looking to check. Now, they will likely do one of 2 types of criminal history checks. One will be simply an internet check. The other may be using your fingerprints, and then they'll contact, if they use the fingerprints, they'll actually directly contact the FBI or the Sex Offender Registry or the SBI. If they're doing a simple internet check, they'll probably try and just access the FBI records and the other organizations' records online to see what they learn. The problem with the internet checks is where mistaken identity can really play a factor. And I've got several examples of where people have had a real issue with that. The most significant one, about, oh God, now it's maybe 15 years ago, in Worcester, Massachusetts. There was a gentleman who applied for a job, and turns out that he and someone else both had the same first and last name, same middle initial. They were both born in Worcester and had similar social security numbers. And when the background check came back, it said that someone was supposed to be in jail on multiple murder convictions. Turns out it was the other guy, not the person applying for the job. But there was enough similarity and enough mistake going on in the background check that it cost this gentleman that job. It ended up taking him over 2 years of legal battles and a letter from the Massachusetts Attorney General stating that he is not the criminal and that the criminal is behind bars, in order for him to be able to get that background check cleared up and make it so he didn't have problems going forward. So you want to know what's in, who else is out there and what may be a mistake. You certainly need to know what's in your own criminal history. You can do that check if you have any questions or concerns by going either to your lawyer or your local police department. And for a fee, the police department, I think, is charging somewhere, most of them around $50. Lawyers probably going to charge you an hourly rate. But most of them will do a criminal history check and give you a copy of the report so you can see what would an employer be learning about you. Now, again, if you don't think you have any criminal history, don't bother. It's not necessary. But if you do, then you might want to just double check and see what they're learning. Now, when they get a report, this is what they're going to find. The report is just a simple typed piece of paper, and it'll either say this is the agency and complete or clear, or it'll give the agency name and the word findings. And then underneath that, it'll tell you the jurisdiction, the charges, and if it's been adjudicated, whatever punishments were put out there. That's if there's a finding. If there's no findings, it'll just say complete and clear and move on to the next agency. The findings that are going to be problematic are guilty, charged, or pending, which means there's something pending in the system, but it's not been finalized, or a bench warrant. And I just want to point out with that bench warrant, those parking tickets that you said, for $5, I'm just going to throw it away and not pay attention to it. That can result in a bench warrant for your arrest if you're ever pulled over again. So don't ignore all of those tickets that you get. Make sure you take that into account. Okay. New Jersey law now prohibits, this is one of the new changes in the law, which is great. It prohibits employers on the first interview and the application from asking you if you have a criminal background. So it's not until they are ready to make an offer that they should be doing any kind of a background check, and specifically a criminal history check. And at that point, then they can make a determination after they've already decided, yeah, we want to hire you, whether or not your background fits. The big issue here, if you've got something in your background, even, a low-level marijuana conviction, go get it expunged. Better to just get it off the records completely than to be concerned about it in the future. It's going to take about a year for that to happen. It may take longer as the marijuana laws continue to change. Talk more about that. Probably going to cost about $1,000, and it's going to cost that $1,000 whether you do it yourself or you have your lawyer do it. Probably better off just having a lawyer do it, because then it'll get done correctly and more quickly than if you have to try and do it yourself. Questions on criminal history? And Pasquale, I see your comment. Cousin and I have the same name. Our records are cross-reference each other. asked why I stopped being a doctor. Yeah,
Yeah,
and see,
I mean, our credit reports, our background checks are constantly getting referenced to each other.
yeah,
Fortunately, he doesn't have anything negative, and neither do I, so we haven't hurt each other.
yep. So, but it's a great example of how this can
Yeah.
impact each other. Alex, go ahead real quick.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. First of all, very, very, very good presentation. But perception is reality. Every time in the past when I saw a client, the first question was, is there anything I need to know about you right now that's relevant to what we're going to do? And I remember the individual said, yes. Said, so what is it? DWI. Said, okay, what's the story? Well, 25 years ago. I said, okay, 25 years ago, but I mean, why are you concerned now? Alex, how about if they find out? So perception is reality. The individual came to my office totally petrified about something that happened in the past.
Yes.
How do you deal? So I told him, don't worry about it now. It's 25 years after. No, I could not get this out of his head. How about if they find out? So perception is reality.
And that's the kind of person where, I would say, all right, then let's go to the police department or go to your lawyer and get a criminal history check done and see what it says. And typically, though, a DWI is more of a moving violation for vehicles than it is necessarily a criminal violation. So, and again, I'm not a lawyer, so don't take any of this as legal advice. But we'll talk about your driving record, I think, next, and that's a whole different issue in terms of how long they'll look for or see that in your background. Okay, but great comment, thanks. Any other questions or comments? Okay, so let's get back over here. There we go. Okay, military records. Listen, they're primarily looking to make sure that you either have a general or an honorable discharge. More often than not, they're asking about your military records because it's a way for them to get kudos with the government for hiring veterans, right? So it's not necessarily, usually it's a good thing to be able to talk about in an interview, as long as it's a general or an honorable discharge. A dishonorable discharge, could potentially be a negative for you in a job search. But the one thing you want to make sure you do is keep a copy, veterans, keep a copy of your own, of your DD-214, which is the primary record used for, people who have been discharged to maintain their eligibility for veteran status in anything. So get a copy of your DD-214, keep it in a safe box somewhere where it can't get destroyed. It hasn't been as big of an issue recently, but back in the 80s, I think it was, I remember hearing of a lot of folks who were having significant trouble because the primary records location for the military, I believe in St. Louis, had a massive fire and all of the paper records were destroyed. And now there was no way for people to verify their military history or their military record. So if you have a copy of your DD-214, you've got a copy of your military record and it can't be disputed. Just make sure you get that official copy. Questions? Can we, and I have copy, yes.
Yes.
Yes, we will be providing a copy of the slide deck for everybody.
Yep.
Official trusted organization, someone can go to I want to expunge, okay. To expunge your records, you need to go to the jurisdiction where the infraction occurred. So that's why you want to have your lawyer do it more than you. But if it was a local municipal issue, then you have to go to that municipality. If it was a state issue, you need to go to that state. Wherever it was adjudicated, whatever jurisdiction it was in, that's where you need to go to get the record expunged. So just make it easy on yourself, truthfully. Ask your lawyer to take care of it for you. Okay, anything else? Okay, so let's talk about credit histories. Big myth. It's been proven wrong time and time again that someone who's irresponsible with your own money is going to be irresponsible as an employee. But employers believe that myth. And so they are watching to see in your credit history, are you behind in your bills? Do you have a bankruptcy? Are there issues that we should be concerned about for you to potentially steal from us? Now, again, if you're in a more fiduciary related role, they probably will want to do a credit history check and put more value to it than if you're not. Okay, so check your credit records. And I strongly recommend that you get your free credit reports at least once a year from each of the reporting agencies. My preference, I do that every year when I submit my taxes to the government. It's the easiest way for me to remember to check my credit. The good news with that is at least once a year, I'm getting a check of where I'm at and what my credit history looks like. I can see if there's anything on there that I have not authorized, I'm not aware of, or that doesn't belong. And then I can take the steps necessary to correct those issues. More and more, I'm finding people who are once every 4 months contacting one of the 3 agencies. By law, these agencies must provide you a free credit report once every calendar year. If you do it like I do, you get one snapshot on one day. What does my credit look like? By doing one every 4 months, you're getting 3 separate snapshots at 3 different times of the year. So if something has occurred in between, you get a quicker opportunity to correct or fix it. So your choice, but I would strongly recommend you do it. Once you see something that's not supposed to be there, immediately contact that credit agency and tell them that. Go through their dispute process and get that fixed. You just don't know when, where, and how that's going to come up and cause you other problems with banking and other financial issues beyond just your getting a job. So keep tabs on your credit report. Now, you can use places like Money Tips, Credit Karma, or Free Credit Report, and you'll get some credit reports. They may not be exactly the same as the report you get from Experian, Equifax, or TransUnion directly. Also, many banks today are offering you access to your credit score. That is different than what you'll get from Experian or the other credit agencies directly. There's actually 2 different scores. There's one that's the consumer score that you and I get to see on a regular basis at no cost. And then there's the score that they share with creditors, which is actually a more stringent and different score. Question?
There are no questions right now, but folks, if you'd like, please put the word question in chat and alert us to, oh, here's one from Julie.
Yeah.
Are companies using Fico as a decision point?
Again, it depends on the organization and what the position is that you're going after, whether or not they're going to do it. The FICO score in and of itself typically is not necessarily a good indicator of things, but it will factor into a company's decision if they're using credit as a part of their background check. I'm actually hearing that more and more companies are moving away from credit history because they're finding it of no value and it's just an extra cost. So that's some good news. Hopefully in a couple of years, I'll be able to say it's no longer really an issue to be concerned about. But it does get us to this whole issue of identity theft. Look at those numbers. In the first half of this year, almost 900 data breaches worldwide. a lower number than in 2020 and in 2019 of only 186 million records that were breached in those 850 or so breaches. But know that, with only about 7 billion people in the world, in the last 5 to 10 years, over 20 billion data records have been breached, which means the chances are very likely that some criminal enterprise has access to our data from somewhere where we've stored it, some organization with whom we've given it, or to whom I should say we've given it. So, things that we need to do to protect our identity. First off, as with a criminal issue, going to your lawyer. With identity theft, contact your financial advisor for guidance. Ask them what are the most current, best things to do to protect your financial identity. I used to hate corporations that I've worked for when they asked me to change my corporate password every month. I could never remember the damn thing. But the more often you change your passwords, the harder it will be for criminals to get access into your data. So the current recommendation is at least once a quarter, you should change your passwords. I like to use a password manager. There are a whole bunch of different ones that you can choose from. LastPass is the one that I use. My husband's in IT. He's not a security person, but he's in IT, and he's done some research. And apparently the National Security Agency uses LastPass to manage their passwords. Here's how that organization works, and any of these password managers. First, they will give you a master password to get into LastPass. Now I only have to remember that one password. They store in blockchain format all of your passwords and all of your logins. And then when you need it, you go to LastPass or whichever one you choose, call up the website that you want to get into and hit launch, and it autofills your password and your ID so you don't have to remember it and do it on your own. Much, much easier. Second thing that you want to do, or another thing you want to do, in fact, I don't have it on the list here, but this is something else I like to do. I use a password phrase to create my passwords. So it may be, my password is 7 PSG Mercer. Now, when I want to go into the Mercer website, I know my password is the first letter of each one of those words, MPI. Then there's a number, a specialty character, and the name of the website. Right? That's not my password phrase. I would tell you not to use that since I use that example in all of my presentations. But come up with some word or sentence that you would know and no one else will remember or know that is an easy way for you to remember your passwords, and use that. One of the things that really surprised me, I didn't realize, the reason why your battery on the phone goes dead so quickly is because every app that you give access to monitor your location is constantly running in the background of the phone, even when you don't have it open. And as long as that app is running, a hacker can get into that app and therefore get into your phone. So any app that you don't use on a regular and consistent basis, just delete the damn thing. The more of them you delete, the better off you'll be. And it's easy enough to just download it when you need it. For example, I haven't been traveling by airline that much, but I have American Airlines and United as 2 airlines I tend to use. So when I'm leaving for the airport in the morning, I download the app. Then when I'm done with that trip, I delete the app. Now I don't have to worry about them having access or people getting access to me through them. So it's simple, fast, easy. Just get rid of the damn apps. And check your website security settings on a regular basis, because they do change. Quite often, for example, when some of the major ones, Google, Facebook, Microsoft examples, when they send out a major new patch or a new addition, they are going to factory reset your securities to the manufacturer factory set. So any changes you've made may disappear. So every time you get a download, you want to make sure you're checking to make sure that those security settings are still set the way you want them to be. Before I go on to social media, any other questions here? Okay, so let's look at social media. No, go ahead.
Well, there's actually one question just came up from Julie.
Yep.
Regarding deleting apps. I've heard there is a specific way to do it, that it's not just removing from desktop.
And you know what, David? I'll let you field that because you're more the expert than I am.
So you've heard this. I don't know what your question is. You're asking if that's the way to do it. And apps on the desktop are different than apps on the phone. So, and then PCs are different than Macs. So I don't have a short answer for you. How to delete from a phone. So is it an iPhone, a Windows phone, or an Android phone? Julie, I think this is a question that's a little bit offline. And I'm not an iPhone user, so I don't have the answer. Usually, a good idea is maybe go to the Apple store or go to your cell phone provider and get the answer best from them. I'm sorry to.
But that's the right answer, I think, though, David. Yeah. Good response. Thanks. All right, so let's talk for a little bit about social media. First off, it is illegal for an employer to ask you for your credentials to any social media site. I actually had to put that in here because my sister-in-law was asked for her credentials to her Facebook account by her employer. And she said, no, there's no reason for me to give it to you. And she ended up not getting fired. Now, this was before the law came into effect, but there's no reason for you to have to give that information to an employer. So I would not do it. But employers are going to check social media to see what they can learn about you. And more often than not, what they're doing is looking to see what they can do to eliminate you from the process rather than to include you in the process. So it's not often that what they find makes you a better candidate. It's more often that what they find eliminates you as a candidate. So you want to know what people are seeing about you online. An easy way to do that is to do a simple search of your name or your image. Set up an alert on Google with your name so that every time something new is added to the net with your name attached to it, you'll get an alert. Find out what they're saying. 411.com is one place. Zoom Info is another place. Search for images, right? So Google Images or images.google.com. Look at Snapchat, Instagram, all of the other social media sites that you go on. And even ones that you're not going on, you want to find out, is someone else posting information about you? And that's where really my concern is. It's not so much what are you going to post about you, because most of us are not going to put things on the internet that will be seen as unfavorable by an employer. We're smarter than that. But what are other people posting about you? For example, my niece, who when she was in her early 20s, typical early 20-year-old, party animal, her friends were constantly posting pictures of her with a glass of alcohol in her hand. So you do a search of her name and all these images come up with her holding alcohol. You'd think she's a drunkard. Was not a good thing for her to see. But she didn't post any of them. It was all her friends who posted those pictures that they took of her. So what are other people posting about you on the net? And what impact can that have on your future? Okay, so the easiest, wrong, the best way to get the information removed is go directly to the webmaster or to the individual who posted the information and ask them to remove it. Fortunately, as we've been hearing in the news literally just in the last month, Congress is taking a harder look at some of the social media apps and pushing them to do a better job of policing some of this kind of information. So it's getting a little bit easier than it has been in the past to have negative information removed, but it's not easy still. So it's going to take your effort to make that happen. There are a lot of organizations out there that claim they will remove negative information for you. Really, what most of them are doing is charging you a significant fee to flood the internet with positive information about you. What that does is just lower all the negative stuff to farther back in the search from page 1 of Google to 4, 5, or 6, or maybe even farther beyond that. The only way that that works, though, is as long as you keep adding new positive information. Once you stop adding the positive information, the negative can start to bubble back up to the top of the searches. So you really want to try and get it removed. But even that's not perfect, because how many times have you taken a screenshot of something off the internet? Well, that now is something that you control, not the original provider who put that content up. So you can go and repost it, right? So it's hard to get stuff off the net once it's there. The better option is to try and prevent it from getting there in the first place. Google Internet Content Removal, and you'll get ways of removing information from Google specifically, but also more and more organizations are having a content removal option in their search. So check it out. Questions on anything with the social media? Okay.
Nothing now?
So let's look at drug testing. Still the most common way for an employer to check for your drug use is urinalysis, but hair follicle and saliva testing are becoming more popular. For a while there, it was blood testing. That's been going by the wayside. So know that it's being done. More and more employers are doing it. Typically, they're going to look for somewhere between 10 and 12 different substances. And that number keeps increasing as new synthetic substances get on the market that could be mind altering. I remember my first drug test back in the late 80s was for 5 drugs. So now we've more than doubled that, right? The other thing you want to be aware of is over-the-counter supplements that you're using. A couple of different stories here. I know of several people who work out at my gym that take a lot of over-the-counter stuff for building muscle mass. A lot of those have hidden steroids in them. And oftentimes it's not listed on the ingredients. And so when they're doing a drug panel, they may be looking for specifically human growth hormones, but they may be looking for other steroids. And they may show up in the drug test because of this over-the-counter supplement you're taking. My mother-in-law, wonderful, crazy woman, got her master's degree in nutrition from a mail order place, and she thought she knew it all. She found some supplement on the internet that she was taking and thought it was the greatest thing. The directions said take 1 a day. She felt really good with 1 a day. She said more is better, started taking 2 a day. Next thing you know, she's starting to turn blue. Turns out one of the unlisted ingredients in that supplement was colloidal silver. And so she was slowly being poisoned by heavy metals. ended up having to be chelated in order to get that out of her system and stop taking that supplement. So know what's in your supplements and don't take them if you're concerned about what that may be. People used to ask me all the time about poppy seeds. According to a pharmacist that I've spoken to, it takes about 5 pounds of poppy seeds ingested in one sitting for you to show up positive for cocaine, I think it's cocaine, from a poppy seed. I know of one case of a elderly woman who for 35, 40 years had a poppy seed bagel with lox and cream cheese every morning for breakfast. And she went for a drug test and it showed up in her system. So it's got to be pretty extreme kind of situations where that's going to be the issue for you. More and more marijuana is becoming a hot button issue because of all the changes that are taking place in the marijuana laws, right? So it is currently illegal for you to be discriminated against. Now, let me rephrase that. It's no longer illegal to use marijuana in New Jersey. However, the difference between the federal law and state law and company policy makes marijuana a real crazy issue to question. So I think what I'm seeing is that marijuana is going to come out in much the same way as alcohol. It may be legal to use, but I don't want you using it if you work for me. So I'm going to test for it in my drug tests. And if it's there, that's a reason for me to say no to you. And company policy can allow for that. Right? So CREMA is the current law that governs marijuana in New Jersey. They can't discriminate against you on hiring, but there's a lot of wiggle room in that. And the laws are so new that they've not been court tested to see how it's going to play out. So the better option is just not to use it. Remember, there is a difference between CBD and THC, the two active ingredients in marijuana. And CBD is the one that's legally allowed for medical use. THC is considered more the hallucinogen. So you just got to be careful about what you're doing. And we got to wait and see in the next 3 to 5 years how the laws play out and the courts play out to see what the real impact is going to be. Questions on drug testing and marijuana?
Just reading through the comments. There's some comments, but not question. Oh, let's see. So folks, it does help if you write the word question just so I can see it among the comments.
So Sam, 4 years ago.
Yeah, Sam has one. Yep. Yeah, about 4 years ago, I am a recruiter. My candidate lives in New Jersey and was considering a job in New York City. His drug test was positive and he was rejected. If that happened now, would there be recourse?
That would depend on New York's laws. In New Jersey's law, as the law is currently written, and I understand it, please go check with a lawyer. They would not, a New Jersey employer should not be able to exclude you from employment simply because of that drug test. They should have other reasons. But again, it's not been tested in the courts. And so that could change. And I can absolutely see, for example, where if you're going to be a driver, that they may say, no, it's hallucinogenic, therefore we can't have you driving our vehicle, and the court will uphold that. But it remains to be seen. As an employer, can I say that I don't want any employee who uses marijuana? Edith, yes, as an employer, I can say that. But again, whether or not it can be held up in court is still the question we don't know the answer to. If the employer, good question, Joe, if the employer is a federal contractor, well, federal law says it's illegal. So yes, the employer can choose to eliminate you as a candidate if they are a federal contractor, because it is against federal law. And again, this is another place where, because there's different laws and different levels, it's just a mess. My best suggestion is just stay away from it if you can. If you can't, make sure that you have a medical marijuana card that allows you to legally have use of it for medical purposes, and that will be more in your favor, even in a federal contract, I suspect. Good questions, guys, thanks. So medical records, let's talk about those. You know, HIPAA limits access. The only people who have a need to know should have access to your medical records. Employers really can't ask you for your medical background, with a couple of exceptions. You know, the question now on almost all applications is something like, can you lift X number of pounds and carry it Y distance, right? In essence, here are typical tasks expected and required of you to be in this job. Can you perform those tasks? If the answer is yes, no problem. If the answer is no, then the employer may ask to enter into a dialogue as to why not, and how can we accommodate that for the Americans with Disabilities Act. Or they may say, okay, we can't accommodate that, here's why, and now we need to eliminate you as a candidate. But that would be the exception of where and how they would want to be able to ask you about any specific medical conditions in your background. The only other place is if the employer requires a physical exam for proof of insurability or ability to do the job, or for your immunizations, more on that in a second, then they can ask for that information. And here's the concept behind the immunizations piece. If on my job, you are likely to come in contact with some type of disease, and you can get immunized to prevent you from getting that disease, it is incumbent upon me to ensure a safe workplace for you. Therefore, I can require you to be immunized. This is really hot, obviously, with COVID right now. But in the end, the lawyers that I've been talking to on this topic are saying they expect that both the law and the courts are going to come down on the side of immunizations. That where my requesting you to get immunized to protect you and your health will be legal. Therefore, requiring COVID testing and or immunization is going to be legal in the United States. Hasn't actually happened just yet, but it's going to happen. And yes, we know the president has decreed that any employer with more than 100 employees needs to require COVID vaccination or minimally COVID weekly testing. So just be prepared for that. It's going to be a requirement. Okay. Edith, I see your comment about MAD will happen to marijuana drugs. Yes, so just like with alcohol, MAD formed in response to people dying from car accidents. Eventually the same will happen with marijuana and drugs. Insurance rates will also be influenced. You're absolutely right. In the end, those are things that are likely to happen. We'll have to wait and see what's going to actually happen. Joe, if an employee is not vaccinated, can the employer charge them for weekly testing? Different companies are responding to that question in different ways. Some are charging the employee, some are charging their insurance, some are paying for it themselves. Where the law will come down on that is yet to be determined. If you can get somebody else to pay for it, all the better. But I can't see that lasting indefinitely. I think ultimately it'll become too costly for insurance and or the employer to pay for it on a regular basis. And since the vaccine is available, I suspect more often employers are going to start saying, if you don't want to get vaccinated, you're going to have to pay for the testing. But that's just my opinion, so please don't take that as reality yet. So let's talk a little more specifically about COVID, right? And yes, this was updated last month. I haven't really gone back and confirmed. I think I heard where Moderna's vaccine has received final approval. The thing is, the final approvals are coming, and as those final approvals come, it gives companies more latitude to require more and expect more from you. So vaccinations are going to be a thing of the future for us. I suspect, and again, I'm not a medical professional, right? So who am I? But based on the research I've done and what I've seen, I suspect that we're going to see COVID vaccinations go the same way as flu vaccinations. And it'll likely be something that, as long as there continue to be mutations, we'll need to get updated vaccines, probably annually, maybe more often. And it's just going to become a part of our life. So plan on it, prepare for it, figure out how you want to respond to that when you're put to question on that from an employer. Questions here? Professional license. I'm sorry?
I think we can move on.
Okay. Professional licenses and certifications. So more and more, as we see employers looking for us to have our PMP, our Agile certifications, our Salesforce certifications, our supply chain certifications, our certifications for certifications, you name it, whatever the certification is, employers are going to start verifying more and more that you legally have those certifications and licenses and that they are current and valid. And it will be your responsibility to provide that proof. So make sure you're not lying about those things on your resume or specifically on the application. It's more and more a tool to screen people out of the process rather than to screen people in. You have no legal requirement to list a certification. You're giving the employer more information to say yes, but don't make it a place where they can use it to say no. So think carefully about what certifications you are posting, how current and valid are they? You could say, for example, I have my PMP, but I've not kept it current in the last 3 years. And so I'd have to go back and retest for it. You know, okay, at least you're being honest about it. But they are going to go and ask you to provide proof from the certifying agency that you actually do possess that certification. Questions? Education records. Go ahead.
Yeah, so there's one question from Joe. If an employee is not vaccinated, can the employer charge them for weekly testing?
Yeah, I covered that already.
You covered that? Okay, good. I'm sorry.
Yep, that's okay. Thanks, Dave. So education records. Still, according to SHRM, more people than not are lying about their education on their resume. Not a wise thing to do. 46% of executives lied about their education. So what's happened now is employers are expecting that you go to those institutions and have the institution send to them directly a certified or official copy of your transcript proving that you have graduated with the diploma or the degree that you state you have on your application or resume. Bottom line, just don't lie about it. It's not worth it. But here's the problem that we're having. In fact, literally just yesterday, I was talking to a friend of mine who recently moved to Florida. The college, liberal arts college that she went to, is out of business. And Florida Department of Education is saying, even though you have a master's degree and you have your teaching credentials through your master's degree, we need to see proof that you completed your bachelor's degree. She had to go to the state to get those records. Now, education records by law must be kept in perpetuity. So somewhere, someone has access to those records when a school goes out of business. The question is who and where. If it was a parochial or a religious affiliated school, go back to that religious organization. They probably have the records. If it was a private, nonprofit or public institution, then the state will most likely have those records. But someone has them. Now, in this case of my friend, she said, the state told me it's going to take them up to a minimum of 12 weeks to go and research and find those records. And because of the manpower that needs to go into doing it, they are going to charge her $250 to $300 to get that transcript. Ridiculous, but factual. So keep in touch with the schools that you've gone to. If you find your high school or colleges are in jeopardy of closing, get copies of your transcripts from them. It's cheaper, faster, and easier for you to get it from them before they close than after. I would suggest you may look at getting, 4 or 5 copies of the transcript. I think my alma mater charges $15 per copy of the transcript. So I'd rather spend $100 now, get multiple copies of it, have them sent to me as official transcripts, sealed in the envelope, and then don't open the envelope. Keep it sealed. Put it in a safe place. Then after the school has gone out of business and you need to show it to an employer, you can pull it out of the safety box and give it to the employer and say, listen, this is what I got. They're out of business. You want to take this, or you want to wait 8, 10, 12 weeks until we can go research and find the transcripts and get an official copy sent from the state of Minnesota or wherever it happens to be. It may work, it may not. I suspect most employers would be willing to accept that and move forward rather than wait that long to get the records. Questions? Yes, Joe, I know some employers or some schools won't send official transcripts to students. So you know what? If that's the case, have them send it to me and then I'll give it to you. We can get around it, right? But yes, you do need to get copies of those transcripts and make it official. The most important thing when you keep them for yourself is just don't touch those envelopes. Keep them completely intact until you need to use it. Any other questions here? All right, so we touched on employment verifications earlier, and bottom line is that's the primary thing that your past employers will do today. Most companies today have the company policy that they do not give out any information on an employee except their title and the dates of employment. Fewer and fewer are giving the reason for separation, and almost none will give out salary, especially because now in New York and New Jersey, among 17 other states, it's illegal for an employer to ask a past employer or you for your salary history. So don't give that information out. You legally don't have to give it out anymore. Okay. But the key is to know what those past employers are going to say about you. And here's an example of that. An employer is doing a call to do an employment verification or a reference check on me. So, employer, Paul used to work for you. Oh my God, we loved Paul. He was such a great guy. boy, I wish I could give you a real reference about him. Unfortunately, our company policy says that I can't even talk to you and acknowledge that Paul was an employee. So hold on, I have to transfer you to HR. Or how about this? You want to talk about that guy, Paul? Really? You think you want him as an employee? Well, I'm not allowed to talk about him, but if you hold on, I'll transfer you to HR. Maybe they can tell you something. Just by whoever answered the phone, I can gather information about you when I'm doing an employment or reference verifications. So know what those past employers are saying. And because of that kind of a response, more and more, especially larger employers, are using a third party to verify your past employment. So Good Hire, People Track, I think it is, and or People Trail, that's it, and Equifax. They are now, when you separate from a company, you may be given an ID number and a phone number and told that when you need to give information about your employment here to another company, have them call this phone number and use this ID number, and that's you giving them permission and us permission for this third party, Equifax or whomever, to actually give out information. And then what the employer is doing is feeding information to Equifax or People Trail or Good Hire, and all they're giving them is your title at the last employment and your dates of employment, nothing more. And that information then is transmitted through the third party to the person requesting the information. So now again, I'm insulating myself as an employer from giving out inappropriate information. Of course, what happens if the information that they transmitted from your employer to the third party is inaccurate? So you want to check those and make sure that that information is correct. Okay. Questions here?
So there are a couple that came up. One's from Chang. At most interviews, one is normally asked to provide info of his or her last pay info, the reason for leaving the previous employer, if any short-term contracting was done, when unemployed, etc. Will such info be validated in the background check, and how?
So again, first off, in New Jersey, it is illegal for an employer to ask you or a past employer about your salary information. Now, the smaller the employer, the less likely they are to be current on HR law. And they may still be asking questions that legally they shouldn't ask. We saw that happen for a long, long time, right? With things like, so do you have kids? So we have to be careful about how we respond to those questions. One thing I like to do is start by asking more questions, just like with the Social Security number. Gee, tell me, what is the reason that you need or want my previous salary information? I'd like to understand how you're going to use that information. Now, you don't want to be confrontational, right? But ask legitimate questions about why they want the information and get them to give you that answer. Then you can decide, do I want to give them information or not? Because remember, if you come back to them and say, well, I'm sorry, that's an illegal question, so I'm not going to answer it, that could be seen as a reason for me to say, well, in hell with you, I don't want you as an employee, right? So you have to be careful about how you're asking these questions and how you're responding to these questions. But get more information, get clarification, and then decide, do I trust this organization to utilize the information appropriately or not? Is this job so important and so right that I feel comfortable giving them the information because I want the job or not? And then respond accordingly. Legally, they're not supposed to ask the question. Can they verify it in the background check? Legally, no. If I were called by another employer to find out what your salary was, I'm legally not allowed to give it out. And if I do, you can sue me. So no, I would not do it.
So one thing though, some states do allow asking the salary question when they make the offer, and then they will verify it. I don't know if New Jersey is one of those.
No, it is not.
Right. So do be aware. I'm not sure if New York is or others. So do be
Right.
aware. They may be able to ask now that they've made a decision. They've taken salary as a question out of the decision, but they can do it as a background check. So some states do allow that. And apparently New Jersey doesn't.
But I think, you know, Alex and Alan Kirshner, who are both on the call, would agree with me in saying, you know, the negotiation of the offer is a whole completely different conversation, and how you would approach answering those questions at that time would be different. In the interview process, legally in New Jersey, they can't ask you for it.
Very good.
Will some do it? Probably.
Mike has a question. When an application says, can I contact your previous manager? The answer choices are yes, no, or contact me first. So should we always say no?
No, you should not always say no. You know, I would probably in almost every instance choose contact me first. Now, why would I do that? Because I want to make sure that I understand why the employer is asking this question, what they intend to do with the information, and maybe more importantly, just say, listen, I know that this company has a policy where they do not give out references. So you can't talk to my manager. They're going to just put you back to HR, who's only going to do an employment verification. So who else would be appropriate that you could talk to? Would you like me to provide you with a coworker who's no longer working there, or a past supervisor who's no longer working there and no longer held to that rule, right? But I can't do that in a yes-no conversation. I have to have a conversation to do that, which is why I would probably choose contact me first. Good question, though.
Chang has a follow-up question about what's asked at most interviews. How about the reason for separation? So I'm assuming the question is that a legal question?
It is at the moment. Most employers, though, are not going to give that information out. And again, you want to think about and talk to your career coach about how to answer that, especially if there's a poor outcome or a negative outcome in why you were separated. Now, if the reason you were separated is the company shut down because of COVID, nobody cares anymore. They get it, you know. Enough people have been laid off because of a reorganization and those kinds of things that most new employers, if you give that as the reason and that's legitimate, they're not going to care. And they're going to say, yeah, okay, I get it. Right? But, excuse me, you want to know why the employer is asking the question before you answer it wherever possible. Okay? If I say contact me first, it seems I sound paranoid. Yeah, I get that. I know company uses the work number. Yeah, no one from the company HR will talk. I understand, Mike, and that's why, as much as possible, I want to be having conversation. So, you know, even on an application, which, by the way, I don't want to be filling out an application until I've already started talking to somebody in the employment process in the company. You know, so in essence, before I'm filling out an application online, I'm hoping that I have the opportunity to network with, if not interview with, the hiring manager. During those conversations, I would bring up, you know, this type of information if it's coming out. But every situation is individual, and I don't want to give a blanket response here because it's going to, you know, give you a false sense of direction. Wherever possible, my go-to is I want to be able to talk to someone about the issue before I give negative information, especially in writing. I saw a couple pass by, so I missed one there, Mike, or David, sorry.
Those are just comments, so I think you can move on.
Okay. All right. Great. All right. Come on. There we go. Holy crap. We got to the end already. Fast today. So I didn't yet talk about references, which I can do if we have, since we have some time. But first, is there any questions on anything else that I've spoken about so far today? Okay.
I have one question.
Go ahead.
When they're looking at your driving record, are they just looking for DWI or are they looking for something else? Like what?
You know, good question. And I think somehow I got past that slide, so I apologize. The driving record, typically they're going to go look 3 years. Some states 5 years, because that's all the records are maintained. Now, there is a caveat to that. In New Jersey, for example, if you get a ticket, a moving violation ticket that includes points on your license, that violation stays on the state driver's record for 3 years. However, if during that 3-year period you get another moving violation, now everything stays on your record for 3 years, right? So as long as you can get a 3-year period with no violations, then everything beyond that is removed from your license. But every time you get a violation within 3 years of each other, everything stays on within that period of time. So for example, back when I was 20 years old, in my 20s, I got several tickets. They ended up, the very first ticket stayed on my license for 7 years because I got a ticket 2 years later and I got another ticket a year after that. So there were 4 years between the first and the last ticket. All of those tickets stayed on my license for 3 years after the most recent one. Now I went 10 years and didn't get any more tickets. I got a ticket again in my mid-30s. That stayed on my license for 3 years, but I didn't get any additional tickets, so it dropped off. Everything else had already dropped off the record. Now I've been ticket-free since then, so there is nothing on my driver's record that would come up in a driver's history check. DWI, if it's classified as a moving violation, handled the same way. That's why people can get multiple DWIs and not end up in jail. So it's a screwy kind of a thing. The place to go to get your driver's record, and you want specifically, it's called a driver's abstract, and you get that from the Motor Vehicle Commission. They charge about $10 or $15 for it. Or you could potentially get it from your insurance company at the time of your policy renewal. However, be clear, there's points that are on your motor vehicle record and there are points that are on your insurance record. They are different. My son was in an accident. It was a no-fault accident. No tickets were written. There is no driver's record of that accident, but it was claimed on insurance. That record, that accident is on his insurance, and it will be for 3 or 4 years. And we're paying extra premiums, of course, blah, blah, right? That's not showing up on his driver's abstract. So it's not going to impact his employment because it's not on the driver's abstract. Question, is that helpful?
I guess what I wanted to know is what could be on your driving record other than a DWI that may encourage an employer not to hire you? Like, what are they looking for? Like, specifically, say, hey, if you have XYZ, we're not going to move forward.
It's the same, typically it's the same concept as credit history. An irresponsible driver, i.e. one who's getting a lot of tickets, is also an irresponsible employee. It's a myth, but that's the thinking. Now, if your job is going to require that you use a motor vehicle as a part of your job, that is, you're going to be driving for Uber, or you're using your own car as an outside sales rep, or you're driving a company vehicle, they may take a closer look at your driving record and be more concerned about that, because it's now going to impact on their insurance costs if you get tickets or get accidents while you're driving their vehicle. Does that answer it for you?
It does. Thank you so much.
Sure. Anything else before we take 5 or 10 minutes on references?
I had a question about the education history.
Okay.
So I went through the hiring, one of those hiring process things, and they had asked education in the past 10 years. They said they were only concerned with the previous 10 years. But meanwhile, I graduated like 25 years ago with my BA and MBA. So I was like, do I put it down? Do I not put it down? What do you do?
I typically recommend you only give people the information they ask for.
Okay, that's what I did.
And then let them come back and ask for more.
Okay.
You know, but again, if you're going through an interview process, you should be getting to know the people well enough to be able to say, hey, listen, you only asked for 10 years back. My degrees don't fall within that 10-year period. Do you need information on my degrees, or is that not relevant at this point? And let them answer it.
Mm-hmm.
Notice, though, I didn't say I graduated 25 years ago. I said my degrees don't fall within that 10-year period. Because I don't want. Okay. Anything else? All right, so let's talk a little bit about references, and then we'll finish up. You know, there is a difference, obviously, between a personal reference and a professional reference. Most often people want professional references. If you're doing some type of a security clearance, they may ask for personal references as well. Okay. Again, it's company policy that's going to dictate what a reference can and cannot say about you. More important for you and I, we need to prepare our references before the conversation. And that's really important. And let me give you an example. I have a really, really great friend. She and I are besties. We go back now almost 40 years. I use her as a reference quite often. She's a nurse, so she's got a reputable background. People take note when she speaks. And oftentimes when I'm using her, it's because I'm doing something that's going to involve people under 21 years old, whether they're in college or younger, okay? And she can speak directly to my experience and knowledge and ability to work with younger folks. So I gave her as a reference. 3 weeks later, 2 weeks after the employer said they would be done with the reference checks and offering me the position, I'm calling the employer and saying, what the hell's going on? I want to get started here. He goes, my God, Paul, thank you for calling. We cannot get in touch with this Mary Jane lady. I said, oh, crap. Okay, let me give you a different reference. I hadn't called to prepare her for the call. Had I done that, I would have learned she was on a 3-week cruise and unavailable. And I could have gotten the reference check done a lot faster and started working sooner. In the end, I got the job. Another example, same person though. She's talking to the employer, giving the reference. Oh my God, Paul is just an amazing person. He works so well with kids. You know, he taught religious education for years. I worked with him at the Civil Air Patrol for 15 years, where he worked with teens and college-age kids, and he did all these great things with them. You know, he probably spent about 20 hours a week with the Civil Air Patrol. He was doing, 3 or 4 hours a week with the religious education. He volunteered for the Red Cross and spent some hours there. And she went on talking about all this volunteer experience that I had. Gave me a glowing reference. The employer comes back to me and said, Paul, I almost was not going to offer you the job, but I've got to just ask you, how did you spend so much time volunteering for all these things and maintaining a full-time job? Oh my God, let me tell you, I didn't do all of that at the same time. Right? But here, thinking she was doing a great thing by telling them all this wonderful experience, made it look like that I was spending 70, 80 hours a week volunteering. When would I have time to do the job? So you need to prepare your references before you give their names to the employer. And what does that look like? Right? So we're going to, when we make the call, we're going to give them a copy of the job description, a copy of the resume that you use, and some talking points. Tell them about the interview, what took place on the interview, what was the conversation about, and then practice with them. Say, listen, they're probably going to ask this question. Tell me about your experience with Paul's ability to manage kids who are misbehaving. Right? So now you get to have a conversation with that reference and see what they're going to say about you and change or correct it to what you want it to be. Clearly, we're never going to include references in any way on our resume. I prefer not to put them in an application if I can avoid it. But I do want to keep a current reference list. And this is what my reference list would look like. It's a spreadsheet on Excel on my computer. I've got about 30 or 40 names on it. Every so often I go through and touch base with all of those people. If they've died or I can no longer get in touch with them, I take them off the list, put some new people on the list. But I'm using that as a way of maintaining my networking with them and my relationship with them. And I'm making sure I'm keeping the information current about them so that when I do need to use them, it's all ready and available. Notice the information that I'm keeping on them: their name, where we work together, their title, their contact information. What was my relationship with them? Was I subordinate? Were they my subordinate? Were we co-workers? Were they a manager in another department? Are we now friends as well as co-workers? You know, those kinds of things. How long have I known the person? Now, in the case of someone like Mary Jane, you know, I'm going to put 40 years. In the case of one of my previous managers, I really don't have an ongoing relationship with them. So I'm going to put the 7 years that I worked there as how long I knew that person. And then I'm listing what things does that person know about me that they can legitimately talk to about my background. Now, when I give this information to the employer, I'm taking as much control as possible over the conversation. So I've prepared the reference with, here are the things I think you're going to be asked by this employer. And I'm telling the employer, here are the things you should talk to that reference about. Obviously, those are going to match, right? So now I'm directing that conversation as much as possible to ensure that only the information I want gets out. So prepare those references as much as you possibly can. All right, so that's everything I have. I want to just take a quick back step here. First, any questions on references? Is the address for the company or the reference's current address? The address would be, typically I would keep it the address either for the company. However, there are some instances where, for example, the company's gone out of business, or if the reference is no longer with the company, I might put in an address where they can mail a reference to them. But again, that's where I want to find out from the employer, what are you going to do in the way of a reference check? How are you going to do it? What information do you need so that I can give them the correct information? If it's going to be a mailed out reference, then I want to make sure I have the correct mailing address where the person's going to receive it, that kind of a thing. Other questions? Anything else? So here's a bunch of upcoming presentations I've got going on. It looks like this background check has been pretty popular these days, so I've got it coming up a couple more times. The project planning your work search is a really great presentation to talk about how do I figure out getting my job search moving. I'm stuck. I don't know what's happening. I'm not seeing any progress. I'm not getting where I need to go. Project plan your job search and we'll get that happening. I'm kind of excited about the November 29th with PSG Central New Jersey, and everyone is invited to that by them. It's bridging the generational networking gap. So we're going to have a panel of 3 or 4 Gen Zs, and then all of you. And we're going to I'm going to just moderate a conversation back and forth between you all. What are your fears? What are your questions? What are your concerns about talking to, working with, interviewing with a Gen Z or a Gen X? And what are their fears and concerns about you? And how can we kind of figure out where that ageism stuff is coming into play? And then from that, understand what can I do to mitigate the ageism in my job search? And then work search buddies at SHRM. You do need to be a member of SHRM New York City to access that one, but they might let visitors in. I'm working with them directly to make that happen as well. So if you're interested in learning about how to find a work search buddy, which is my book, then you might be interested in that. I do have a bunch of support groups that I facilitate. The Yojo Club is going to be meeting right after this, as a matter of fact, for job seekers under 30 years old. And all of these groups, with the exception of PSGMC, which operates similarly to this group, the rest of these are all peer support groups where you'll get, say, 10 minutes. And during that 10 minutes, you're going to tell us what's happening in your job search and maybe what your greatest challenge is. And then all of the people on the call will brainstorm with you to find ways to resolve that challenge for you. So the Yojo Club is under 30-year-olds. Outstanding Careers is primarily for the LGBTQ community to have a safe place to talk about what's happening in their work world. Morris County Executives in Transition is really for any professional. And the Supply Chain Professionals group is for those folks in supply chain and logistics. If you want to attend any of those groups, please just contact me and I will be more than happy to give you that information. There's my contact information. I also put it in the chat at the very beginning. I think I saw that David did so as well, and I'll do it again if we want. Thank you guys so much. David, thank you for the time.
Well, Paul, thank you very much. I just also posted your contact information again in chat as well. Anyone, you can download chat whenever you want. In the upper left corner, there's the Go to Meeting icon. Click on that. There's a drop-down menu, and one of the items is to download chat. But Paul, thank you so much. Your programs are always a wealth of information. And I wasn't sure if anyone was getting a little nervous or scared, not about Paul's presentation, but about the idea of background checks and reference checks. And I think what Paul's demonstrated is there's no need to be scared of any of these things. This helps you take control over your ability to make sure that only the information you want to present, only the people that you want to be contacted, get contacted. So that's really what this is for, not to be scared, but realize that you have a lot of control over this as a process. So thank you, Paul. You really clarified a lot of these points. Just before we officially wrap up, want to just let you know what else is going on over the next couple of weeks. Next week, we will be right back here on Friday morning at 10 o'clock. It will be November 5th. My goodness, it'll be November already. And Kathy Krejci will be here, making stress work for you. Not all stress is bad stress. Stress helps us focus and could be very good for us as well. So Kathy will be talking about making stress work for you. The following week is November 12th. Keisha Butler Thomas is a certified branding strategist. We'll be talking about social media unlocked. So if social media is something that you're not really familiar with, how to use effectively, a little scared of it, she will be talking about that, social media unlocked. And she is a branding strategist, a certified branding strategist. So we're so glad to have these programs coming up over the next couple of weeks. And then coming a little bit further down the road on Saturday the 13th, which is also 8 o'clock in the morning, the Breakfast Club of New Jersey will be meeting. Bill LaChance and Sean Lavison will be presenting money strategies during a career transition. It's not a financial management presentation. It's really understanding things like the costs of healthcare and budgeting and things like that. All great topics. PSG of Central New Jersey, as Paul just mentioned, meets every Monday at 10:30 in the morning. Check out their website at psgcnj.biz. And PSG of Morris County, Paul also mentioned, psgmc.org meets Wednesdays at 9:30 in the morning.
And David, let me, if you don't mind, just real quick, PSG and CNJ, Central New Jersey, on Monday the 8th, they are doing a recruiters panel. They do this, I guess, annually, and they really want to see a huge turnout for that. So if you're at all interested, that would be a great time to check out that group.
And I did see that post, so thank you. And 2 of the recruiters are internal recruiters. They work for companies, and 2 of them are agency-oriented recruiters. So you'll have a nice mix of the different types of recruiters. Should be a great program. Okay, so if there's nothing else for our meeting today, we are going to keep this session open. I'm going to turn off the recording so you can speak your mind and tell us what you really think of us. But I'm going to turn that off in just a moment, and we'll keep the session open and we can chit chat for a little. I know Paul has another program he has to go to in a few minutes, but you're welcome, Paul, to stick around if you can for a few of these minutes. But until we get to see you again very soon, wish you a happy Halloween if you're going to be celebrating or giving out treats. Hopefully this year will be a lot more fun than last year's Halloween. And we'll simply say until we see you next week, bye, everybody.